This tip is brought to you by Hobbies.com, the photography social network. Whether you are an SLR professional, a Nikon novice, or an iPhone spur-of-the-moment photographer, there are certain techniques you can implement to capture images truly worth sharing. My top 10 digital photography tips are as follows. Tip number 10. The rule of thirds. Focal points are the key areas of interest in a photograph. If you are taking a portrait, it may be the person's eyes. If you are taking a landscape shot, it may be the mountain in the background. The golden rule is, never place focal points at the middle of a photograph. The powerful effect of a focal point is accentuated when it's taken off center. Mentally visualize every image as being divided into 9 boxes, created by 2 evenly spaced vertical lines and 2 even-spaced horizontal lines. Now, picture that middle square on a grid. The 4 corners of that square mark the locations of your areas of interest. Consider an image taken of the Statue of Liberty. Instead of placing the Statue of Liberty at the center of the photograph, the statue, that is the focal point, should be purposely kept out of the middle box. This creates a more dramatic image, with a Manhattan skyline providing a superb backdrop. This rule of thirds is very useful for all types of images. For example, for sunset images, use the horizontal top line to position the sun, and thus ensure the foreground accounts for 2/3 of the shot. This gives the images more depth and dramatic effect. Tip number 9. Pick a point to frame a shot for professional effect. A very effective way to create an instantly professional image is to use a nearby object to give an image perspective or to alter its perspective. For example, consider an image taken in a relatively unexciting restaurant environment. By purposely using 2 pint glasses, the photographer can add an element of altered perspective to the image by making the pint glasses seem larger than life. This is achieved by positioning the camera near the glasses in the foreground and keeping the person in the background. It would also emphasize what the individuals in the image were engaging in at that moment in time. Tip number 8. Vary the angle the shot is taken. This is a very simple concept, which is seldom realized by amateur photographers. By altering the angle the image is taken, the subject matter can be greatly enhanced. For example, whenever I'm at the beach or in a boat, I take images by holding the camera at water level. This provides a dramatic panoramic image that looks like the camera was floating on the water. In fact, this low-level camera angle can work very well in many different types of situations. When I was in New York, I used to capture images of the skyscrapers by placing the camera at footpath level. This had the desired effect of accentuating the height of the skyscrapers. Tip number 7. Create slow-motion effects. Creating a slow-motion effect on subject matters, ordinarily associated with swift motion, creates photographs that have the wow factor. The most effective subject matter for this type of image is waterfalls. Commence by discovering a nice composition with running water, then extend the time the camera's shutter is open. Be sure to use a tripod to ensure the camera stays steady during the long exposure. It is also advisable to use the self-timer to trip the shutter. According to photography expert Derek Story, if your camera has an aperture priority setting, use it and set the aperture to f8, f11, or f16 if possible. This will give you greater depth of field and cause the shutter to slow down. Ideally, you'll want an exposure of 1 second or longer to create the flowing effect of the water. That means you probably will want to look for streams and waterfalls that are in the shade instead of the bright sunlight. Another trick is to put your sunglasses over the lens to darken the scene and create even longer exposure. Plus you get the added bonus of eliminating distracting reflections from your composition. Tip number 6. Expression of motion. Capturing a moving object is an important conversion in digital photography. You can generally achieve 3 different types of effect. A complete freeze frame, with both the subject and background clear, non-blurred, and still. B. An image where the background is still, but the subject matter is blurred, to illustrate the speed they are traveling. C. An image where everything is blurred. To create an effect where every aspect of the motion is clear and sharp, you need to use a high shutter speed. Use a shutter speed of at least 1/300 of a second. If you are trying to capture a fast-moving object, set the shutter speed to 1/1000 of a second. If you seek to blur everything in the shot to convey to the viewer how fast everything is moving, lower the shutter speed to 1/100 of a second or less. To achieve panning, that is motion blur of the background while the subject stays clear, you need to use a slower shutter speed while moving the camera at the same rate as the moving object. Tip number 5. Taking spectacular nighttime images. The key secret here is to always use a tripod. This is necessary to achieve a clear exposure with a great depth of field. Try to use a foreground object to frame the image and give it depth. Tip number 4. Taking portraits. The most effective portrait photos are those taken when the subject is not expecting or not ready. Many top photographers will take the image when the subject is fixing their hair or clothing while getting ready for the shot. These provide more genuine images that are far more appealing. Tip number 3. Take black and white images. Black and white images are a very effective means of transforming the mood of a photograph. If you find yourself at a beach on a cloudy day, a black and white image will appear more scintillating and bring to life shots which would otherwise have appeared colorless. This technique is also useful for nighttime images taken within big cities, such as Manhattan. Tip number 2. Timing is critical. Whether you are on a city break to Prague or visiting the pyramids in Egypt, taking images at dawn or dusk will present more exciting photo opportunities. For starters, less if any people will be around the earlier you start, thus ensuring an uninterrupted landscape shot. You will also benefit from more interesting effects of shadows and colors as the sun shines at different angles throughout the day. This is particularly noticeable in the evening when the light becomes warm and golden. Tip number 1. Monetize your images. Upload your images to sites such as Shutterstock.com and get paid for every time someone downloads your images. These tips were brought to you by Hobbies.com, the photography social network. It's 100% free and offers great features for the photography enthusiast. Feel free to join today at http://www.hobbies.com.